Hi guys, it's Usernamekate and today I am doing my in-depth review of the Honda Hornet 750. So if you're interested in hearing what my experience has been like to ride this bike, I've put about 500 or so miles on it, then stick around and I'll let you know what I think. First thing I want to touch on is the engine, the big lump that is at the heart of the Honda Hornet. 90 brake horsepower. To ride it, it feels sprightly, it feels punchy, it feels charismatic for a Honda, which, no disrespect Honda, but usually, you know, they're not all that spicy, but I feel like the Honda Hornet gives a little bit of spice with the parallel twin. I found that the bike picks its feet up extremely well. It's no slouch, and 90 brake horsepower with 190 kilograms wet weight is a great power to weight ratio. Like I said, no slouch, fun and engaging to ride. The next thing I want to touch on is the gearbox. Really impressive gearbox. What I found about it was when you're riding along, the gears feel quite tall and really long, and I like that because I feel like you're never trying to, you know, prematurely hunt for that next gear because the gearing is too short. To me, it almost feels like when I used to have an SV650 with standard gearing and standard sprockets. Me and Mike changed them for a trip that we had to Germany, and it made the gearing so much longer and it was much better for motorway comfort and stuff like that. And I feel like the gearing on this bike kind of feels like that. So plenty of revs through the gears, nice and long and tall, and I actually really enjoyed the gearbox for that reason. Tech. One thing about the tech on this bike is it's pretty bloody good for its price. Now you got the 5-inch TFT, so you've got a TFT screen, which is awesome, and you have a lot of customization with it. You have a user mode where you can decide how much, you know, how much of a punchy throttle and power you have. You can decide how much engine braking you want the bike to give you. You can decide how much traction control, well, Honda's selectable torque control, which is basically to normal folk like us, traction control. You can decide how much of that you want to use, and you can even switch that off, which basically is kind of like a full-blown wheelie mode. But then you have the standard modes like standard, sport and rain, and they're not just modes for mode's sake. When I was riding along and trying them out, you actually do feel a good difference between them all. Sport is spunky, pokey, barks when you rev it. Standard is standard, just as you'd expect. And rain just really softens the throttle response, which I've been riding 15 years, and on a 90 brake horsepower bike, rain mode isn't something that I would use even in the rain, because I think 90 brake horsepower, I should be able to control it with my throttle in the rain. But for newer riders or less experienced riders, it is a nice option to have, and it might just give them more peace of mind if they are riding or commuting in torrential weather. Another thing about this bike and the screen and the switchgear is how it all works. It's super easy to use, super intuitive. Now I was a bit worried after riding the Africa Twin because the complexity of it all was a little bit mind-boggling, a little bit distracting. I didn't really know whether I was coming or going with it. What am I doing? What does this button do? Like, I had no clue. With this, straightforward, very easy, simplistic. Horn button feels like it's in slightly the wrong place, but that is something that you get used to. So one of the things that I found a bit odd on the switchgear is actually the passing light. It isn't on the back of the switchgear, it's on top of it. So when I wanted to let somebody out, and I know you shouldn't flash, but we all do it, okay? I'm only human. I went to flash somebody and I couldn't find the passing button, the passing light, because it was on top. But something that you get used to if you own the bike, I'm quite sure of that. Moving on to the handling of the bike. Now the handling is something that, you know, I heard a few reviews and everybody harps on about how good the handling is, how agile it is, how quick to steer it is. And I thought everybody was just hyping it up because it was a new bike and they were, you know, trying to focus on certain things. But it is actually true. It steers very, very quickly. It has a pretty strong chassis with a very skinny rear. We've got a 160 rear on the back, which one is obviously going to help with cost saving. It's going to be cheaper, I would say. I mean, I'm no expert to put a 160 rear on than a 180. And yes, a 180 looks more aggressive, but in theory is a more nimble wheel size when the bike's being thrown around in quick bends, quick turns. At first, when you get on this bike, I found that I had a bit of a tendency to turn it too quick, so I'd end up kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time sometimes. The steering on this, super quick. Let's counter steer now. Oh, it just dips so lovely. But it is something that you get used to very quickly. You understand how the bike moves, how quickly it does turn. You adapt to that. Happy days, you just appreciate it for what it is. So yeah, steering, turning on the country lanes, it just went where you looked. It felt very satisfying, very flowy through the bends, and it is a pleasure to ride on the twisties. Moving on to suspension. So you guys, if you haven't seen my full walk around video where I go in depth of the hardware of the bike, we have some shower forks up front and they are upside down, but they are non-adjustable. And how is the suspension set for somebody who is just under 10 stone? Well, it's pretty comfy. It absorbs the bumps nicely, say you go in normal speeds through towns. It's not jarring, it's not jolting, it just kind of coasts over them and you feel like it is a pleasant, comfortable ride. For me, the issue arises when you're pushing on. So I was over Snake Pass, I was out with my girl Lily, and we were stonking along a country road. And then out of nowhere, this group of lads come flying past, overtaking us very inappropriately. Like, come on dudes, wait, you know, it's quite a narrow road and you're trying to overtake us when we're not hanging around. And their presence and bullish nature kind of forced me and Lily a bit into the gutter, as you'd say, on a country road. And that is where I found the limitations of the suspension. I kind of feel like the chassis is writing checks that the suspension can't cash, because the road got a bit rough, a bit bouncy, a bit rocky, and because we were already, you know, giving it some for a more sprightly, progressive ride, I did feel like we got a bit of front end shake going on. I was like a pogo, I was bouncing around a bit. So yeah, for those guys that day, just check your ego, man. It was not an appropriate place to overtake us. But yeah, it did highlight something, so on one hand, thank you, but on the second hand, don't do it again. Brakes on this bike, we've got Nissan calipers, 4-pot radially mounted on the front of some nice twin discs, and we've got a Nissan caliper on the rear, and the stopping power is perfectly ample and adequate. When you initially brake on that front, you don't have a super initial bite, but as you pull the lever, it definitely stops quicker than its initial bite would suggest. So it's kind of gentle on that front pull, but it does stop you, and combined with a bit of back as well, it can slow you down real quick. Riding position and comfort on this bike, my bum hasn't been in too much pain, and I've done quite a fair few miles in 2 days on the trot. It is a bit firm, but it's not something that I'm consciously thinking of when I'm riding. I'm not thinking, oh god, my arse is numb. So that's a good sign, because if I felt like that, then obviously it's got a comfort issue. But after the amount of riding that I did over the 2 days with Lily, I would say that it is fairly comfortable, and its comfort is kind of what I'd expect on this bike for the miles that I did. I wouldn't complain about it, and if you've got a rather sensitive rear, then I suppose there's always things you can do, like those little Oxford cloud seat things that are like inflatable and keep your tush comfy. But I didn't think it's necessary on this. I found it totally fine. Fuel economy, I've kind of let you guys down on this one. I've been having that much fun on the bike. I've not really been keeping tabs that much on the old fuel economy front. Bad reviewer. Having said that, I filled up and I was keeping a bit of an eye on it, and I think after about 70 miles I was at the halfway point on the tank. So that kind of gives you a rough idea. Does it? Doesn't it? Who knows? Because it was a mixture of sedate riding, town riding, a few little progressive bursts. So yeah, I've let you down, guys, I've let you down. But hopefully Honda will lend me this bike again so I can really go into the fuel economy. Let's talk about the height and the weight of this bike. First things first, the height. 795mm. Now, you guys know for me that I can pretty much flat foot this on both sides as somebody who is 5'4" with a 29-inch inseam. Honestly, my personal opinion is if you are over 6 foot, I feel like you need to test ride this bike before you commit to putting an order down, because even I find this bike small, and I'm small. So if you're tall, I feel like you might need to test it a little bit before you do decide to buy it, because over time I can imagine, you know, your legs are going to be a little bit more cramped than mine are. And yeah, definitely test ride it if you're over 6 foot, because I don't think it will be for you. Now, I might be wrong because I'm not a 6 foot person, but I'm just saying from my perspective, I find it a little bit small. When I've been going out with Mike and watching him get on this bike, because I have been on a few pillion rides with him, when I look at him get on the bike, he's 5'11", and I look at him thinking, oh, like, you're borderline probably too big for this bike, in my opinion. But again, like I say, I'm 5'4", so I can only really speak as a 5'4" human, basically. So take what you want from that, but I would just advise test riding before committing, just so you're 100% sure that the bike height is going to be adequate for you. Weight of the bike, 190 kilograms wet. I find it really light. It's great for me to push around, great for me to get out of the garage by myself. No issues, no dramas, perfectly manageable. And yeah, I don't see it as a sticking point at all. I think it's quite a good weight for a bike of this category, a naked middleweight. So yeah, no gripes there. So I'm just going to quickly summarise some of my main likes and some of my main dislikes when it comes to the Honda Hornet 750. Main likes, I love the dash. A dash for me is really important. If I'm spending a lot of time with a bike, I like to know exactly what's happening in there, exactly what I can do to it, exactly what levels of customisation I have, and there's a lot, whether it's the background colour, whether it's the actual display, changing how it visually looks, and then you've also got actually fine-tuning elements of the bike like power, engine braking, torque, turning off the torque completely so you're being able to wheelie and having the freedom to do so. And I just think that level of customization is very, very good for a bike that's £7 grand. Other things that I like, this bike has been equipped with a quick shifter, £240 if you want that outside of a sports package. Sports package has a few other things like screen, pegs, seat cowl, and is £555. But for me, like, I would just be happy with a quick shifter at £240. I think that is exceptional value for a quick shifter and blipper. And yeah, it's something that I would definitely have. It's made my life easier with clutching and all that jazz. So yeah, definitely a nice addition to this bike, and it just makes it feel more sporty and more expensive. Another thing that I like, the handling and the lightness of the chassis. all combined, it just makes it such a fun, engaging, sprightly ride, not boring, which I know a lot of people criticise Honda for having, you know, a bit of a lack of character, maybe being a bit sedate, a bit zen. But with this, no, you can make it pretty sprightly, you can pick its feet up if you want to, and yeah, it does go, it goes, which is nice. Another thing that I really like is the sound of this bike. Now I know it's got the SC Project end can on there, and I haven't actually heard a Hornet with the standard can on, so I can't really compare it, but from my experience of this, it burbles, it pops on the downshifts, it sounds sexy. I think if you're going to get a Hornet, you need to get some kind of exhaust on, whether it's this, which is £900, so it's like a seventh of the price of the bike. Whether you can justify that or not is not for me to say. I'm sure there'll be other options available in the near future, but I would definitely say that an end can on this is a must, because it sounded sexy, and I didn't think it would sound sexy, but it did. So yeah, I've loved riding this bike with that exhaust on, especially going ba 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 through the box. Ooh, so nice. If we're moving on to a few little dislikes, one thing that I do have to say, which I struggle with all the Hondas that I've ridden so far, albeit it's only been two, the CB1000R and the Africa Twin 1100, is I find the throttles snatchy. I just do. And Mike didn't experience it, so maybe it is just my riding, but I tried to ride a little bit more sedately. I mean, I don't know how more sedate you can get than going into a very tight bend in second gear without obviously using the clutch, just, you know, letting off the throttle, gradually introducing the throttle and being like lunged forward. Like, I don't like that, Honda, so yeah, that stressed me out a little bit, but it wasn't all the time, it was just sometimes. So yeah, the snatchy throttle, I don't know, maybe you could get it tuned out, you know. I don't know, but it's something that I'm acutely aware of and that I did notice, specifically going through towns at slow speeds, second gear, sometimes you just gradually try to put the power on nice and smooth and it just hits you with it. Another thing that in my opinion lets the bike down a little bit is the suspension, but I do get that it is built to a price and that more premium suspension would bump it up, but would I pay a little bit more for a bit better suspension? I personally would, but if this is aimed at newer riders, commuters, people that want a sporty-ish bike to a low price in comparison to competitors, then I suppose the suspension is perfectly adequate. It was just that moment when we were pushing on a bit, when the bikers pushed us out and it got a bit bent out of shape, and I didn't like that. But if you're riding normally, you're riding sensibly, you know, you should be okay with it. But yeah, just the suspension for me just lets it down slightly, so it gets a little negative mark for suspension in my opinion, but it is my opinion. And then again, something that is personal preference, I would have liked slightly wider bars on this bike for a bit more leverage, a bit more push and pull on the old counter steering. But it's not bad. I just feel like for somebody who's a bit more built in stature than I am, they probably would, you know, appreciate a wider bar. But it's not a deal breaker, but it's just something that I was thinking, what would I do to this bike if I could, you know, do it my way? Put some wider bars on. Guys and girls, I hope you have enjoyed this quick review on my time with the Honda Hornet 750. If you guys have ridden it, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. If you've liked this video, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, because there'll be plenty more content like this in the future with different bikes. So yeah, get notified. And hopefully guys, I'll see you on the next one. So take care and ride safe. Bye. Now, I've had this for about 2 weeks and I've put probably over 500 miles on it and I'm losing my voice. I'm losing my voice. Lord knows I'm losing my voice. Oh, it's giving me raspy soul. And another thing that I struggled with actually on the switch gear was the like main beam light where you can flash people. Wait, no, I'm joking. Hi guys, it's Usernamekate and today why do I keep looking down? It's like a nervous tick little habit thing. What's there? Who knows? Can you see me? Can you see all of me? I did feel like we got a bit of front end shake going on. I was like a pogo, I was bouncing around a bit, and yeah, for those guys that put me in that position, no, don't put that in. Oh, is this Honda? No, interiors. I thought Honda was here to collect the bike then. Just to visually look at Mike on the bike, and he's 5'11", so he's not even a 6-footer. No offense, Mike. I love you, Shark King. Shark King! You'll freaking kill me.